Welcome in to another Best Bets episode. Now up to 38.5 units, or 38.2 units, I guess, to be accurate, in the green for the season. Pretty even week last week, but, had been running pretty hot before that. But, now we're a couple weeks away from March Madness. Going to have a lot of action here coming up. And this week, the last week of regular season for the big conferences, we'll also have some betting talk in regards to some of the mid-major tournaments. In particular, I think the Missouri Valley will probably have an article out about that on the website. But as for the games this week, we've got a few bets we're going to discuss for Tuesday, Wednesday of this week. Then we have a few leans we're quickly going to mention before wrapping things up. So we're going to jump right in. One of the games of the week tomorrow, Texas A&M hosting Auburn. Texas A&M coming off 4 straight losses. Auburn just clinched the SEC regular season title. So this line opened at Auburn -6 or 5.5 in some places. You can still get some 6s, but we're on Texas A&M here plus the 6. Simply because it feels like a desperation spot for A&M. They don't want to go into SEC tournament play coming off 5, maybe 6 straight losses. And Auburn doesn't really have a ton to play for. They've had some guys banged up, so maybe they limit minutes a little bit more. Maybe they even sit someone. I don't know. We'll see what Bruce Pearl decides to do. But this number, as for any of you that listened to the pod last night, it's shocking that this line opened where it did, considering the circumstances of this game.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely wouldn't be surprised if Bruce Pearl decided to sit guys, maybe Broome or Chad Baker-Mazara sit out late in this game, because Auburn could realistically lose out the rest of the year, and they're still on the one line and possibly the number 1 overall seed. Their resume is just that good this season, and a loss to A&M on the road wouldn't hurt their resume really at all. But either way, this is an unbelievable spot for A&M, and they're really scrappy as an underdog as always. I always love playing them in this spot, and mostly just because they're so good on the offensive glass and they can kind of compete with anyone in that area. And if you're going to get to Auburn's defense, this is the one area that you can get them. They're 161st nationally in defensive rebound rate, while A&M is the best offensive rebounding team in the country. You can also win the shot volume battle in another way at the free throw line. A&M, they're 23rd in the country in free throw rate, and Auburn, they're 317th in free throw rate allowed. So in the SEC has a lot of teams that will foul quite a bit, leading to this game might last 2 hours and 45 minutes to 3 hours in regulation. So if you want to stay up late, this is the game for you. And
is this a 9 p.m. tip?
I think so. This game could end at midnight.
It might. It really
realistically might. Yeah. And also A&M, they've had some turnover issues like we've talked about a little bit on the last pod, but Auburn, more of a drop coverage defense. They don't really get after you on the defensive end all that much. They're 167th in turnover rate on the defensive end. They turned over Kentucky a little bit, but that was more unforced turnovers on Kentucky's end of the floor. So not super worried about A&M in that regard. And obviously Auburn could light them up from 3 in this game, but just with Buzz Williams' defensive style leading to teams getting some open 3-point shots at the A&M really wants to deny the rim at all costs. So that's the price that they kind of have to pay, is teams knocking down some shots against them. But during the 4-game losing streak, teams are shooting 42% from 3 against A&M. So you could definitely say they're due for regression in that area. And yeah, just for the number, I'm definitely surprised it came out at 6. Projection sites had it at 6, but like you said, this spot is just so significant in A&M's favor. And it felt like the spot for when Tennessee was hosting Florida, and that line opened at 1.5 and it shot up to 4.5, 5. And we haven't really seen that movement yet, which is kind of interesting. And regardless, I think this number is favorable to Texas A&M. This line's kind of implying that they're the same as Ole Miss or Kentucky, and I actually have A&M power rated as a better team than both Ole Miss and Kentucky, and over Ole Miss by a pretty significant margin. So I don't really understand the number, and when you bake in the spot, and I actually like the matchup for the offense. This is a bet I have to make on A&M.
Yeah, without a doubt. They're going to be playing with their hair on fire in this game, if I had to guess. So, I expect them, as we've said, I wouldn't be at all surprised if they just win this game outright.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to play the money line here, I wouldn't really fault you, as A&M they're really good at always staying in games, and anytime I can grab points for them, I'll always take it. And obviously, they're going to be vulnerable against Auburn's shooting ability, but I'm still okay with this.
Yeah. The next game, Iowa State, they're -8 against BYU. This line opened at 7. In some places is now up to 9. But Iowa State finally looks healthy. Played really well on Saturday against Arizona. BYU, as we've talked about over the last few weeks, is running extremely hot. Moved up again in the AP poll this week, continuing to just win. They've won, 6 in a row now, I think.
I believe so, yeah.
So, another sell spot, I think, on BYU. And I think this is the one where they finally get humbled a little bit, get exposed by Iowa State's healthy offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be. There's got to be some regression coming for this team at some point, especially in the shooting category. They've shot the lights out over these last 6 games. And like I've said, they have really good shooting all over the floor. But some of the defenses that they faced were favorable matchups for their shooting ability outside of West Virginia, who I did fade BYU again with West Virginia. But it just feels like if I don't fade them here, it's going to be a blowout for Iowa State. But I have to stay on this, as I think they're definitely at the peak of their market, and Iowa State can still be considered to be undervalued, especially now that they're healthy. And BYU, they've also struggled against pressure defenses quite a bit this year. They haven't faced a lot of them, but they have losses to Ole Miss early in the year, who they lost to in overtime. They put up 85, but they had some turnover issues in that game. And then Houston absolutely mauled them early conference play on the road. I believe they lost by 30 plus. And TCU, who they lost to on the road as well. Those are the 3 best pressure defenses that they faced, and they failed all 3 of those tests. And I think Iowa State is pretty much on par with Houston when it comes to their pressure. So I do expect that to give them some problems. And yeah, Iowa State, we've talked about the offense at full strength. It looked like a top 10 offense in non-conference when they were at their full strength, and they'll have plenty of opportunities to shoot over the top of this BYU defense that packs it in and plays a little bit of zone at times. I don't think you're going to be able to zone Iowa State when they have Curtis Jones and Momcilovic on the floor. I think they're going to be big impacts in this game. Should see a lot of open 3-point opportunities against this Cougar defense. And number was a tad higher than I wanted it to be. I know Torvik had it at 4, but I think Torvik is extremely high on BYU for whatever reason. I think he has him 13th in his ratings, which is it's pretty far off from what KenPom has him. KenPom has him at 25 right now. So there's a little bit of a disparity there. I'd have them closer to the 25 to 30 range in my opinion. And yeah, Iowa State's still definitely a little undervalued at this point in time. At full strength, we've seen it. They're a top 5 team in the country, and I'll continue to back them, especially at Hilton.
Yeah, for sure. Feels like they definitely at least come away with a win here. They should cover the number, I think, exposing that BYU defense. Final play we have as of right now, but as we've said in previous episodes, right, the Discord is where you're going to find all our plays. If, we get on something tomorrow that we didn't talk about in this episode, also probably some player props that we don't discuss on here because they don't come out until tomorrow. So final play here, as for right now, Villanova -3 at Georgetown. Georgetown, as we've talked about in previous episodes, Thomas Sorber out for the season, projected first-round pick in the NBA draft. He's really being without him, it's really hurt their defense. He was their defensive anchor. And since then, they've looked pretty abysmal.
Yeah, I mean, he was basically the backbone of this team, especially the backbone of the defense. He was actually their most impactful offensive player as well, according to Torvik. So definitely a major impact on both ends of the floor. And since he went down, I believe that was 4 games ago, 4, maybe 5 games ago, teams are shooting 62% inside the arc since he went down with that foot injury, which would probably be the worst mark in the country. I was more just a guess, but it's got to be pretty close. And they don't really have the offense to make up for it either. They're 177th in adjusted offense per Torvik. They don't really have any shooting to get over the top of this Nova defense that is pretty similar to like a BYU style defense. They try to deny the rim because they don't have much rim protection, but I don't think Georgetown's going to be able to expose them here in this matchup. And for Georgetown's defense, again, they're going to have to rely on turning over Villanova, and Nova does a pretty good job of taking care of the ball. They're top 60 nationally in turnover rate on offense. So they have some steady-handed guards that I trust, and they can handle the ball 1 through 4 at least, with Eric Dixon playing the 4. So, and I don't really love betting on Villanova on the road. They've had some dicey road performances, especially on the offensive end. They put up 59 against Seton Hall. They put up, I believe, 59 on the road against DePaul. Like, it just wasn't not pretty performances, but I don't think this number takes into account how much Sorber means. And I wanted to fade Georgetown on Saturday against Marquette, and I was hoping the line wouldn't jump to Marquette -8. So this line might move as well. But yeah, I just don't think this line's being priced appropriately right now. I think by tomorrow, I think you'll see this line a little bit higher.
Yeah. No, I mean, Georgetown looks pretty pitiful and seems to have packed their season in despite the somewhat promising start. Unfortunately, they're going to have to wait another year unless they go on some miracle run in the Big East tournament again, like they did a few years ago. But I don't foresee that.
Yeah, that was with Patrick Ewing on the sideline. So I guess anything can happen if they can get through a Big East tournament. But yeah. I'm not the biggest Ed Cooley guy either, especially as an offensive coach. I don't think they really have many answers, especially this year.
No. So that's it for our official plays for right now anyway. We do have a few leans we're going to talk about real quick. First one, St. Louis +6 at Dayton. This is more just a play on the number. I watched a good bit of Dayton's game against Richmond on Saturday, and that game was hideous for anyone who watched it. 48-48 going to overtime, ended up going to double overtime. Dayton was honestly very fortunate to even win that game, and they were 14 and a half point favorites in that game at home. This is really just a play on the number. St. Louis has been playing much better. They beat Loyola by 30-35 on Saturday, I think. Don't remember the final number. They're playing well. They lost by 8 to Dayton earlier in the year at home. Now they're +6 on the road. I think it's two teams that are trending very differently as they prepare for conference tournaments. So this is really, I still kind of expect Dayton to win this game, but I think that St. Louis keeps it within the number. But wouldn't it all be surprised if St. Louis even wins this game outright?
Yeah, and Dayton's probably going to have a pretty tough time guarding Avila as well. They don't really have a guy up front to really contain him, and this is going to be a battle really of who just makes more shots. These defenses don't really – I mean, these teams just don't really win the shot volume battle in any way. Like, neither team rebounds all that well on the offensive end. The ball security is a bit dicey on St. Louis's end, but Dayton's not really going to get after you. So I think it's going to come down to if St. Louis can make 12 or 13 threes, they're going to be right in this game. And, same thing for Dayton. But, yeah, I would definitely like to take the points in a battle of, like, just who's going to make more threes, who's going to make more shots.
Yeah, this is going to look vastly different than the game Dayton played Saturday, where Richmond just, wants to play a slow pace, limit possessions. And that game was sub 50 going to overtime. So I think it's going to look a lot different tomorrow night.
Yeah, I would agree.
Next one, Arizona -17.5 against Arizona State. This Arizona State team has really just quit. They're just they're ready to go home, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of it's dependent on injuries as well, and they're going to be facing an Arizona team that's going to be really motivated off their loss to Iowa State, and this is a rivalry game, so Arizona's always going to get up for this game. I just don't think Arizona State has anywhere near enough, especially from a personnel standpoint, especially if Quaintance doesn't play. They're not going to be able to keep Arizona off the glass, and Arizona State doesn't have the shot making ability that they've had all year long since BJ Freeman left the program or got dismissed from the program. He didn't leave on his own. Adam Miller's out right now, and Alston Mason came back, is still sick, kind of didn't really play his best game at Utah. So this team's not even close to full strength right now. Trevor Best went out there and played 28 more minutes on Saturday. So yeah, they just don't have the personnel. And if they get down early, I think Arizona is kind of built to break away from these teams with their fast pace and physicality. They're going to smoke them on the glass most likely. So, and I expect them to not lay off the gas pedal in this game with how last game went. So with the lack of respect that Arizona State showed, I mean, it was probably the lack of respect on both ends, but if they get up early, they're going to keep hammering them, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Arizona State, I think, is ready to call it a season, but this game did end pretty chippy last time they played. They didn't shake hands, so maybe there's some motivational factors there, but I still don't think it matters.
No, I don't think so either.
Next one, LSU plus 12.5 at Kentucky. Kentucky unfortunately lost Jackson Robinson now for the season, which really I think hinders where they can get to, unfortunately. So they've just been pretty unfortunate with injuries down the stretch here, and probably going to end their season earlier than they would have hoped.
Yeah, that's a big reason why I would play LSU here. I'm probably not going to end up getting to this, but it was just kind of something to mention, like just the lack of ball handling and like Robinson. That's what he brought to the table, and his shot making ability, especially off the dribble. His ability to create his own shot is pretty important to this team that doesn't really have a ton of shot creators outside of him. And I think LSU, they guard the 3-point line extremely well, and their athleticism could really bother Kentucky. And you saw that on Saturday. Auburn was able to, harass them a little bit and force some turnovers. So I don't love this LSU team. They're probably the worst team in the league, but I think their athleticism can play up in this game. And I do worry they get a little bit 3-point happy at times when they really don't shoot it well at all. But I'm kind of just hoping that, they can harass these inexperienced Kentucky guards outside of Butler and be able to get all over the glass as well.
Yeah. We also kind of lean South Carolina and Vanderbilt. South Carolina is minus 1.5 now. I don't know what it opened at. Vanderbilt opened much shorter against Arkansas. That line's now up to -7 for Vanderbilt. So both probably ones we're going to stay off. But if those numbers were lower, those were probably a couple that we would have been on.
Yeah, it was mostly just fading Georgia off of their recent run. It looked like a good sell high spot, but I think it's kind of baked into the line. So no real reason to go to South Carolina as a home favorite in that spot. I mean, they've been pretty fortunate to us, but I mean, probably not going to go to them as a favorite there. And then Vandy, mostly because of the injury to Thiero, they look like a much different team, but at -7 off of the win that Vandy just had, it just doesn't seem to make a ton of sense.
Yeah. Also lean Maryland plus 1.5 at Michigan. We talked about this one a bit on the last episode, but more, I think Maryland can do a good job of matching the bigs of Michigan. And as we talked about on the last episode, they have significantly better guard play. So I think that this Michigan, just Michigan being at home is getting a little bit overrated here. I think this Maryland team can certainly go in there and win on the road. I think they've shown the ability to do so in other games. So I think that Maryland, assuming they can stay out of foul trouble in the front court with Queen and Reese, I think they can limit Wolf and Golden, and those Maryland guards can just outscore those Maryland or the Michigan guards and ultimately pick up a road win.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get points against this Michigan team, I would snatch them up every single time. They can't win a game by more than a possession, so it's and they showed that against Illinois on Sunday. They're really regressing. I think they've kind of showed that they're on fraud alert this entire time, and I do like this Maryland team quite a bit. And yeah, the foul trouble does concern me quite a bit. If either one of Reese and Queen get into foul trouble early in the game, there's not a ton of depth on this team. They're going to have to play Gapari, I believe, off the bench, who's fine, but he's just not the same offensive threat that those guys are up front. So I lean that way as well. And they do have the edge at the guard spot, like you said, but there could be a little bit of extra motivation for Michigan. And I wouldn't be surprised if this line was a little bit shorter, or even Maryland potentially being a pick or a slight favorite, just because I think the markets are starting to catch on that Michigan could be a tad fraudulent.
Yeah. And the last one, Marquette +2 at UConn. For anyone that watched the last time these two teams played, I forget the number, but UConn made how many threes? Like solo ball, I think hit like 7.
Yeah. I think it was like 14 or 15 threes.
So this was a game that UConn actually turned the ball over, I think 24 times and still won at Marquette. But if you watch this game, I think like Marquette just kind of ran out of time. It felt like UConn was just spiraling quickly. Like they were snowballing to the finish line, and they were just hoping for that clock to run out because Marquette was just getting to the bucket at will in the first 10 seconds of the shot clock, forcing a turnover. Luckily for UConn, they just hit enough threes. UConn's Achilles heel all season has been turning the ball over. Their guard play has been subpar, and their creation on the offensive end has been subpar. So I think Marquette here is the play. I think they go on the road and pick up a win. But UConn at home, you just never know. But I think this Marquette team is just going to create too much havoc for this UConn guard room.
For sure. Yeah. 25 turnovers in the first matchup. They went 12 of 19 from 3. That's 63%. And Marquette was in the game, like down the stretch. And like you said, they basically just ran out of time. It was that early run from UConn. They went up they're up 18, 17 early in the game. Yeah. And Marquette was playing catch up the rest of the game and definitely looked like the far better team for the last 30 minutes of that game. And anytime you can win the shot volume battle by as much as Marquette won it by, I mean, they won the turnover battle 25-8. They competed on the glass. They had 17 offensive rebounds themselves, but they did miss a ton of shots, so it might be a little bit skewed. But overall, that has to be the side to play. Shaka Smart is an underdog. A lot of people talk about that trend and that narrative, and it is true. And his teams always play more motivated when their backs are against the wall or when they're playing better competition. So grabbing the points with a Shaka Smart team seems like the smart thing to do.
Yeah, UConn's also just not very good. So
yeah, pretty much. But yeah, where are they going to be sitting? Like 8-9 line at the moment.
Yeah,
just goes to show. I mean, they have a ton of upside, and the 8 and 9 seeds are going to be so dangerous this year. Once March comes around, I think we might end up seeing one of the crazier Marches that we've ever seen. Like these 1 seeds look like kind of invincible at times, but these 8-9 seeds are pretty good. And UConn has the upside to beat anybody in the country. They've shown that all year, but yeah, the turnovers are a huge issue.
Yeah. So anyway, enjoy these games. Hope your bets cash. And we'll stay tuned in the Discord. We'll probably have some other bets that come out, or maybe some player props that come out tomorrow. Also have the ASUN, quarterfinals tonight. ASUN quarterfinals tonight. So enjoy for any sickos out there watching Central Arkansas and Lipscomb, among 3 other games. So should be a fun night. Should be a fun week with conference tournaments starting up. Stay tuned for all the content we're going to be putting out, and we'll talk to you next time.